Good afternoon, guests, ladies and gentlemen, speakers. Allow me to express my sincere gratitude. Thank you for attending this event. This event is organized by Indonesia Synergy and Indonesian Students Association. Khairul Salvador is the current president of TNU, Indonesian Students Association. My name is Alvidia. I'm a PhD candidate at Asia Pacific College of Diplomacy here at ANU, and with Denny Friawan, I'm coordinating Indonesia Synergy. Indonesia Synergy is a group of an informal study group consisting of Indonesian students, not only at ANU but also University of Canberra, UNSW, ANFA, and other universities around Canberra. We regularly hold discussion mainly on various topics of Indonesia. And today we are very fortunate to have two distinguished presenters who will submit their PhD thesis soon. Really inspiring for me. I mean, I'm still a long way to go, still 2 years. So hopefully I can get a lot of benefits from these discussions. So the first speaker is Chutdewi, not Katewa. She is a PhD student at the ANU's College of Arts and Social Science. Professionally, she is lecturer at Universitas Syed Kuala in Aceh. She got a bachelor degree in architecture from Universitas Syed Kuala and master degree from University of Groningen in the Netherlands. She started PhD in 2011 in the School of Architecture, Department of Architecture.
It's a School of Humanities and Arts.
Okay, it's a School of Humanities and Arts. The second speaker is Pak Wahyudin Halim, PhD student at School of Culture, History and Language. He is also lecturer. He is also lecturer in the University of Islamic State University Alauddin Makassar. He got bachelor degree from that university and 2 master degrees, one from Dalhousie University in Halifax, Canada, and the second one is from Temple University in Philadelphia, United States. Both of them are my good friends. Have inspired me a lot during study, and both of them are very popular, as you know. Chutdewi is, of course, very popular, probably one of the most popular Indonesian in Canberra, especially every Friday. So in Canberra, we will miss Chutdewi and her family, and also her bakso. So. And Pak Wahyudin, of course, is a well-known ustad, Islamic preacher, probably one of the most popular ustads here. Yes. So yeah, without further ado, I would like to invite Chutdewi first to give the presentation, 10 or 15 minutes, and yeah, we'll continue Pak Wahyudin.
Good afternoon.
Oh, ya. Orangnya nggak kelihatan, Wit.
Oke.
Satu aja.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming for my presentation today. The title today is Iconic Architecture Heritage in Banda Aceh, Remembering and Conservation in Post-Disaster Context. Actually, that is my thesis title, but today I'm not going to present the whole thesis because it only 10 to 15 minutes. I'll only take 2 chapters from my thesis, chapter 2, which is literature review, and my case study with interviewing people in Banda Aceh. So my aims to present this paper, in this paper I aim to characterize architectural heritage in post-disaster context by taking into account the interrelationship between form and function, and it criticizes a strong notion that architectural heritage is merely about monumental aesthetical form. So I'm going, my thesis actually contributes a lot to theoretical debate of how we should understand architecture. Mostly what you see now, like you see Parliament House, Old Parliament House, and other historical buildings in Canberra. What a lot of attention have given to that building is to its forms instead of its function. Why its function has been like ignored for a long time and to some extent has not been acknowledged in architecture and heritage conservation. So why this understanding come from? It's come from the understanding of architecture heritage, especially heritage in Europe around 18th centuries after the Enlightenment and French Revolution. People start with the romanticism of the past and then see the past as important aspect of identity, and then therefore some architects like John Ruskin, Ledak, and then art critique also involved in formulating what is architecture heritage and how to conserve it. And then through their power, they impose this understanding to like international heritage agencies like UNESCO, ICOMOS, as you know. So a lot of what comes to Indonesia as well now, through UNESCO and ICOMOS, is European understanding of heritage conservation instead of what we Indonesians have by our culture. And how that is come to Indonesia through colonization, of course. When the Dutch came to Indonesia, they did two important things. Firstly, they established the Monumental Ordonancy, which rule and regulates all heritage, and then that's adopted to our regulation later on after independence, 1995, and then 2010, the new regulation for heritage conservation. All of them derive for European understanding. So this understanding, European understanding, has been a lot of critique, especially in Asia, that doesn't fit with Asian values, which mostly Asian value is impermanent. We see the form, the tangible, like the table, the buildings, in intangible form. And jump to Aceh case, in Aceh, a lot of how people understand the forms, the tangible forms of heritage, especially architectural heritage, a lot of influence given by their engagement and their adoption of Islamic values. So in Islam, maybe most of, maybe like Pak Wahid, expert in Islamic studies, we understand in Islam that we regard the things is impermanent. We don't take things to our, to our life after this. So all things live in this world. What we take is only the intangible aspect of that things, how we use that things. So that's really influenced how people in Aceh see heritage. So what the consequence is, especially for a post-disaster context, this European understanding? Firstly, because it's regard a lot of values to things, to forms, instead of the function of the building. Of course, heritage is not service. Only rich country can afford for heritage conservation. And then only well-developed country with good economy can do heritage conservation and has a lot of heritage. You can see, if you look at the UNESCO maps, most of the heritage dots is in Europe and only some in China. If we look back to the cultural development of architecture, China is like, can be seen as one of starting point where in the east where like a lot of dots of new, all architecture or Asian architecture developed. But because the maturity doesn't actually exist, we can't see any buildings that made of timber or made of a traditional structure exists until now. Therefore, no such thing heritage there if you can't provide the material evidence of it. Therefore, only some rich country can afford it. Secondly, in post-disaster context, this has a consequence in seeing something as if, like, after disaster, all the things, all the material is swept away. It means nothing there. The place, the space is empty. Nothing worth has heritage there. study, Banda Aceh. The 3 dots is actually the specific building that I integrated in this thesis. Kelandahan Mosque, Tsunami Museum, and then the Baitur Rahman Mosque. And then this how like the setting of Aceh after the tsunami. So by looking at this with the point of view of European conservation ethos, we can't see any heritage left, so this place is empty. You will see what the people see, that what I'm presenting today. What people in Aceh see place like this for them. For the experts like me, for example, or UNESCO or e-commerce, they see this place completely empty. No more heritage there. This number of interviews that I did 166 interviews, and then 9 groups interview with the community. Apart from that, I do 22 interview with the government experts, and that I call that I call the authority. This one community. Okay. Now let me see what people think about the change. You see, like when the things went away from the perspective of UNESCO and other international organizations, the place is empty. And if you change something, like for example this mosque, the Baitur Rahman Mosque, has been changed several times over since 17th century until now. So from the perspective of UNESCO, this mosque, the Baitur Rahman Mosque, is not heritage at all because it keeps changing. And this mosque, the other mosque, this mosque is not heritage as well because it's changing as well. The latest one in 2008 is the mosque, the new reconstructed mosque with new material that is shift from wooden to, you can see that bricks and concrete. And this Tsunami Museum is not heritage as well from the perspective of European modern conservation ethos because it's new. It's not 50 years old yet. It's just when I did my fieldwork 2011 until 2014, it's only 7 to 8 to 10 and 9 to 8 years old. So this is what I found in my fieldwork, that I asked people in my field, in my fieldwork, what do you think about the change tsunami has brought, and what do you think about the change all the 3 buildings in Banda Aceh? Most of them you can see. This is the response at the Baitur Rahman Mosque. I know this building, the Baitur Rahman Mosque, ever been burned, rebuilt, and enlarged. It is not original, but it is still the same. The mosque, the Baitur Rahman Mosque, is the same. It was built with 1 dome and then renovated into several domes. The mosque was renovated to accommodate more worshippers. It is changed, but my enthusiasm to come and pray here do not change. To be closer to God, to Allah, it means all the time, this mosque is house of God. And then another expression, the mosque is an icon of Banda Aceh with long history. The building remains the same, and indeed it is conserved as it is. You see the change, but for them it is conserved. Only some renovation has been conducted so far. Nothing broken and newly built. And then for some, even such change, they will regard as like will not change as long as the function is still the same. And then there's in the bottom you can see how like when I asked the one of the even that's for Acehese, I found the Japanese who like live in Aceh that still that also think like the feeling remains the same. There is no correlation between change of the mosque and the comfort of feelings. The most important thing is ibadah, they say worship. To me, change does not do anything. All the mosques are the same. The most important is worshiping at house of God. So you can see the change doesn't affect architectural heritage, borrowing Spellmaster, is only scaffolding of memory. Scaffolding, you know, when like you want to climb, you want to build a building, you need scaffolding first to paint and to do everything, and then scaffolding you can take off. But the building you build by using the scaffolding is still there. So this is my theory. This is my contribution to debate on architectural heritage. So I continue the definition. Borrowing Spellmaster, the scaffolding of memories to which memory is recalled and its existence and absence can direct and give a cue to people to remember as well as forget. How this architecture works in the remembering process should be understood through the interaction between form and function. You can't only value forms, but you need to value them both at the same time, because if you overvalue the form, when the form vanishes, you will regard like the place that doesn't exist, but actually in the memory of people it's there. Therefore, following Smith, this is the theory that I adopted in my thesis, and why that argue the importance of use in recalling memories and adapting change that architecture created to contain human activities are argue function or activities in the architecture is central element of architecture. So it lends an importance to form instead of the other way around. Because if we see from the perspective European concentration ethos, that the forms make the building important, but actually it's not the case in Aceh. But what made my argument different from Smith? Smith's only privilege the function only, but myself, function and form need to integrate together. Therefore, this is my contribution to the debate. I suggest acknowledging buildings that have experienced some alteration to accommodate, enlargement and even duplication of forms to accommodate current use and post-disaster context in which a preservation method in most cases is not applicable as heritage school. And thank you for being inclusive by considering that building as heritage school.
Thanks, Pak Wahyudi.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Pak Awid and the Relations Committee for organizing this wonderful workshop or seminar, and would allow me to at least take some refuge for my working on the thesis for almost 4 years now, and having an opportunity to get suggestions or probably also insights from the participants of the seminar. I need to say that I would like to tell a long story as a background for my being at ANU to pursue a PhD in anthropology. I am a theologian by training because I spent most of my undergrad and master's program in religious studies. And anthropology and theology are to some extent two different fields of studies which are opposite to each other in terms of the approaches, in terms of the sources, and also the inspirations. Theology is based on the personal reflections, logic, something abstract, while anthropology is based on the observations and assumes to be objective in describing the situations being researched. So first time I arrived in Canberra, I talked to my potential supervisor that I have a big ambition to answer big questions that I encountered in my theological training. That is the big gap between ideal Islam and the de facto Islam. For example, in theology, we learn that Islam is a complete civilization. Hamilton Gibb, for example, once said, Islam is indeed much more than a system of theology. It is a complete civilization, which is actually very accurate description of the nature of Islamic teaching, which actually cover all aspects of human life, from waking up until you go back to sleep. Everything Islam deals with. And also, it is compatible with technical age. This is according to Marshall Hudson, and also very modern, even too modern for the Muslim, that the Muslim cannot actually catch up with the teaching of Islam. Rational, future-oriented, etc. But then the question is, why does the life situation of the Muslim people, be in Indonesia and elsewhere in the world, tend to represent a rather opposite fact? Muslims are not actually building civilization, but building confrontation, building a very left behind life situations. They are not the master of technology. Many Muslims are not rational, but still believe in mythical things, solving the life, solving the problem of the life by going to the non-decision, how you call that, and so on. So this is a big question that lingering in my mind when I was involving in theological discourse in Indonesia. So what went wrong with Islam? This is the question asked by Bernard Luis. So in general, you see there is a big gap between normative Islam and practice Islam. Ideal Islam sanctions in the scripture, the Quran and the prophetic tradition, and the actual Islam. Islam that is practiced by the Muslim anywhere, everywhere. Islam in scripture and Islam as a culture, textual Islam and contextual Islam, great traditions, little tradition. This is a kind of binary oppositions proposed by many anthropologists to describe between Islam in the center and Islam in the periphery. And also normative ritual piety and also socio-cultural reality. In Indonesia, we often heard notions that orang Muslim itu saleh ritual tetapi biadab sosial. Yeah. Jadi, this is what we call normative piety and socio-cultural reality. According to current research conducted by Sri Razade Rahman and Hossein Askari, it appears that the Muslim majority countries are not actually very Islamic, according to the Islamicity index proposed by these two scholars. As you can see, here there are a number of Islamicity indexes proposed by these two scholars to see which country is the most Islamic. For example, in terms of economic opportunity and economic freedom, do Muslim countries provide equal opportunity for economic prosperity, gender equality, pay attention to the poor people, to the disabled, and so on. And then we see this overall Islamic index rank. And amazingly, the most Islamic country in the world, according to this index, is New Zealand. And we are still lucky because we are in the country on the top 9 ranked Islamic country. And you can see that very clearly. The cleanness, the politeness of the people, the equal opportunity to get everything, and also you can make the list even longer. But what about the overall Islamic index rank for the OIC countries, Organizations of Islamic Cooperation? You see here Indonesia is only on the top, on the rank 140. Malaysia is far better in the 38, quite Bahrain. But luckily, Saudi Arabia is far below. You see here, Saudi Arabia is in 131. And in fact, this indexity, Islamicity index is really in line with the teachings of Islam in the text. The text mandated the Muslim to be fair, to concerns about the destiny of all people regardless of their races, of religion, and so on. So my hypothesis is this: what causes all this kind of paradox? My first assumption is that early Islamization project in the archipelago only give emphasis on nominal, legal, mystical, political confession, but less on cultural, intellectual accommodation, inculcation, and integration. In other words, during the Islamization process, which is very long, what is the most important aspect that preachers were given is how to be Muslim with commitment to perform ritual, salat, puasa, zakat, and so on, but not touching on the importance of cultural, intellectual heritage, as for example Mbak Juntewi was talking about. And also the second one is Islamic education project in Indonesia, regardless whether it is a modern system or traditional system, apparently give emphasis only on ritual, theological, legal, ideological aspects. We don't see quite often school, for example, give instructions on the importance of social, intellectual, practical, moral aspect of Islam. There is an ethical, there is a special subject on Islamic morality, akhlaq. But what we see in this kind of mental learning is that we tend to direct orientations for the afterlife. Why should you treat your parents good? Because in the hereafter, anak durhaka akan masuk neraka, and so on. So the orientation is always not in this world, but in the afterworld. And also, of course, there is an influence of colonialism, globalism, transnational Islamic ideologies and movement. So, as I show it here, the second factor is my major concern, which is the Islamic education. And that's why also I focus my study on Islamic education in Indonesia. And my personal observation is that normally Islamic education in Indonesia only give foundational knowledge in Islamic doctrine, law, morality, and history, and sometimes also give training on obligatory ritual practices, rukun Islam, mengajar salat, puasa, zakat, dan sebagainya. Kemudian indoctrinating religious values and attitudes to students in order to become devout, saleh, ya, Muslim yang saleh within the religious community, and also. And this is the big issue at the moment, secular tendency among Muslim educators to distinguish between religious and secular education. So there is still a very clear-cut separations between Islamic subject and general subject, which actually very secularistic in nature. While in the past, during the Muslim reigns in this world as a big civilization, a great civilization, all Muslim education had not distinguish between, there's no distinction between secular and religious, just between intellectual and textual knowledge. Okay, let's see various contents and orientations of Islamic teaching in Indonesia. On the left side, we see that most, if not all, Islamic education institutions in Indonesia give emphasis on these factors: legal, mystical, ideological, nominal and symbolic, formal observance, personal achievement, afterlife, reward and punishment, performative identity. So very symbolic. While the ideal orientations of an Islamic education, in my opinion, is that it should be also intellectual, rational and scientific, substantive, moral perfection, appealing for communal development, and also orienting life of the Muslim to this world instead of just to the afterlife, and also give emphasis on the rational and practical benefit of all actions in this world, and then total embodiment of Islamic teachings in our life. So that's how it goes. Why then I'm interested in looking at the importance of Islamic education in shaping the way Muslim people in Indonesia live their life. So I'm focusing on, big question is, being Muslim in Indonesia, what are their typical characters, if there are typical, and then narrow it down into factors shaping the Islamicity of Indonesian people. And I found that education, Islamic education in particular, has a very important role in shaping the perspective of Muslims about their life. But then this is still a very big subject to deal with. So my supervisor suggested me to narrow it more to a small unit of education, which is pesantren and madrasah. But still, madrasah, there are thousands of madrasah and pesantren in Indonesia. I cannot do a national survey to get an idea of why education, how education, Islamic education in Indonesia influenced the people's way of life. Then I pick up one pesantren in South Sulawesi, which is Asadiyah. That's how it goes. So a long story to tell actually, and that's why I transferred from Hadley Bull to Coombs. Yeah, I was placed and I was accepted actually in this political and social science department. But then because my explanation, my supervisor suggested me to move to anthropology department because this subject is better observed from anthropological point of view. So this is the let's say initial topic of my dissertation, Pesantren Asadiyah and the formation and transformation of religious authority in contemporary Sulawesi. And there is a question. First, I'd like to see the character of Islamic traditions that Asadiyah has transmitted and maintained in Wajo. How does Asadiyah maintain and strengthen its socio-religious influence within the Muslim community? What has been the role of this pesantren in the transformation of the structure of religious authority since the 1930s in the region? And finally, what role has Asadiyah's tradition played in the context of the social mobility of the people Wajo within South Sulawesi and beyond? This is the map of the district, Wajo district in South Sulawesi, and this is the map of Wajo district. It comprises, I think, 14 sub-districts. And I should mention that I come from the small district here. Yeah, I can show you the sub-district of Bilawa, but my research was located in the city of Sengkang. So in that sense, I am not an insider. But on the other hand, I'm also a local anthropologist or a local ethnographer, indigenous ethnographer, let's say. But in terms of the educational institutions that I'm looking at, I'm not from that pesantren, but Irfan is. Yeah, I'm lucky because now I have another alumni of this pesantren coming to Canberra that can become a potential informant for me when I got something I need to ask. So this pesantren was established by this ulama. He was born in Mecca, but his parents came from Wajo during the conflict in that small kingdom at the end of the 19th century, and migrated to Mecca and became a great scholar there, and then had a number of children. One of their children is Muhammad As'ad. So he spent his early years in Mecca memorizing the Quran, learning in formal madrasa that was established by the Indian Muslim in Mecca. And one of his achievements was becoming Imam Tarawih for 3 consecutive years in Mecca when he was still 15 years. Yeah, you see 15 years, but he was able to lead the Tarawih prayer in Masjidil Haram. Probably he was the only one of Jawi ulama who led the Tarawih prayer, but there was one of the nation scholar who became imam, permanent imam or imam rawatib, imam Muhammad Khatib Al-Banjari, if I'm not mistaken. But as in terms of Imam Tarawi, my sources claim that he was the one and the only one who took this role in Masjid al-Haram at a very young age. Also, before become 16 or 17, he had mastered most classical Islamic knowledge, and he was particularly outstanding in Arabic language. Then he went to Indonesia in 1928 at the age of 21 and studied his halakha in the same year, and then established madrasah 2 years after, and died in Sengkang, Wajau in 1952. So he died at 45, which is very young, but his legacy was really extraordinary. As you can see here, most of the Islamic leaders, Islamic authorities, ulama, leaders of pesantren in South Sulawesi had gone to As'ad to learn under his directions, and they established their own pesantrens after As'ad died. So Muhammad As'ad's role in South Sulawesi is very much like the role of K. Haji Hashim Ash'ari, the founder, one of the founders of Nahdlatul Ulama in East Java, and pesantren that Hashim Ash'ari established in Java became the source of the ulama in East Java in particular, who established their own pesantrens and become religious authority on their own right. These are major programs of Asadiya currently, but there are also small programs that I haven't mentioned here, but in particular there are 4 major aspects in which Asadiya played a very important role in Islamic education in South Sulawesi. In formal education program, non-formal program, but particularly for the advertising program of Da'wah, and later there are also 2 other programs added to this major 3 major programs, which is Islamic microfinance and religious syllabus. This is the map of Sengkang, where I conducted my fieldwork for almost 12 years, from December 2011 to December 2012. So I live near this complex, which is the biggest complex of Asadiya. Another complex is here in Masjid Jami, and another one is here. And then they are now building a new site in the north part of the city, which is probably the biggest complex of all. But it is under construction. I can explain a little bit more. So these 2 mosques are 2 mosques where the halakha, or the small learning circle conducted every after the performance of communal prayer. This is the main campus in Lapong Koda. As you can see, it is very crowded with buildings, but even in one complex there are educational institutions from kindergarten to Islamic college. And then this is kind of assumptions that have been developing so far to prove that this institution is very important in the Islamization process in South Sulawesi. Before the coming of As'ad, or before the establishment of this pesantren, the Muslims in South Sulawesi commonly practice what we call excessive syncretism, which is the mixture of pre-Islamic belief and practices in Islam. And also, to some extent, they still retain many pagan elements, like worshipping stone, worshipping trees and animals, and so on. And less practice Muslim in the sense that they are Muslim, but they are not practicing Islam as normally practiced by truly Muslim. Like, for example, they are not performing prayer, daily prayer, and so on. And also, there is a limited applications of Sharia, like, for example, marriage law, death, inheritance, and so on, but also very limited knowledge of Islam. Islamic education almost non-existent. But then, after the establishment of Asadiya, Muslims become more Puritan, become more fanatic, if you like, following major reformist Muslim project. They become more observant, performing the Hajj, and also extended and intensified practice of most aspects of Sharia. And Sengkang, where this pesantren is located, is considered to be the Ka'batul Ilm, the the Center of Islamic Learning and Socialization for almost 3 decades. So this is theoretical basis of my dissertation. The encounter between local culture and Islam, and in this process of encountering, there are a number of steps that is still going on even until today. That is encountering, adaptations, adoptions, incorporation or accommodation, integration. And in this process of encountering, adoption and so on, is facilitated by Asadia through a number of programs that I've mentioned earlier, like Halaqah, Tahfiz, Al-Quran, Pesantren, Madrasah, Dakwah, and the productions of ulama. I'm not going to talk about this theoretical, but let's see my thesis outline. I'm still working on a number of these chapters, revising some of them, but now I'm working intensively on introductions. But I hope that I can complete that in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I think that's all I can say, and thank you very much for your attention. And I'm very happy to hear from you anything about what might feel regarding my assumptions on this subject. And particularly to Irfan, I think I would like to hear from you because you are the alumni of this institution. You should be proud of that. Yeah.
Thank you for what you did, and to Terry. We still have around 40 minutes for question and answer. So if anyone has questions, please. Yes.
Sorry, I miss Mas
Wahid.
Pak Wahyu last one. I think have you mentioned about the results of your dissertations by any chance?
Yeah, I think I haven't talked about that, and to be honest, I'm still struggling with how to clarify my subjective kind of involvement in these kind of institutions, and also to make a case in terms of the contributions that my dissertation would make in the whole discourse of pesantren in Indonesia, which is a very actually apa kalau subject yang sudah membesarkan ya,
Boring.
well developed research subject already. Yeah. So there are 100, I think, dissertations already about pesantren in Indonesia. But one thing that makes me very confident is that none or not many of these kind of research on pesantren deal with pesantren outside Java and Sumatra. So mostly pesantren research are looking at pesantrens in Java and to some extent in Sumatra, yeah, and also in Lombok. Yeah.
Any
So
other?
is it-
Sorry.
Is this the case study that should be implemented? Is that like the way you see it? So this is like not correct, but like a good one to be implemented as a Islamic education in Indonesia. So
Yeah.
because you mentioned before that Indonesia is not Islamic
Right.
country at all. So
That's really a good question, and I can draw your attention to the fact that we can see clearly in Australia that to change people's mind is through education, and the education should be studied when they are still very, when people still very young. So moral character should be developed from the earliest age. For people like, for example, from primary school. But in Indonesia, it is not the case. Normally, we give moral education in university and level like pendidikan, kewargaan.
Keluarga.
So my suggestion is that, I mean, this dissertation has two major purposes. First one is to describe the role of an Islamic education in the transformation of Islamic authority in one particular region, and in turn, in transforming Muslim perspective, social religious life of the Muslim. But at the same time, it was also trying to see education as the major source of the malady, or it becomes also factors that determine the destiny of a nation. Corruption, cleanness, justice, equal racism and so on, anti-pluralism, sectarianism, and so on. All these kind of things can be developed or can be also reduced through a better education system. Yeah. So, for example, there are a number of pesantren in Indonesia that are suspected to be training militancy, training radicalism, and so on. But on the other hand, there are pesantren also that give emphasis on the importance of pluralism, on living together in peace between people regardless of their ethnic background and religion. So there are two aspects that you can see for this space. Yeah.
So this pesantren, does it teach pluralism or militant?
Both. Yeah.
Both.
Yeah. Because this is interesting. Students of Azhar established their own pesantren upon finishing their studies in Sengkang. They are not teaching the same thing.
School of thought.
Yeah, and this is a good thing about Azhar because he allowed his students to read whatever they like. So there are kind of pesantren that inclined to radicalism, but there are also pesantren established by Azhar students that more to progressive Muslim kind of perspective. There are Muhammadiyah, there are Asadiyah, there are NU coming from this pesantren. So from the same pesantren, we cannot see the same orientations of students when they establish their own institution elsewhere. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Wait.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm in late, so I missed today's presentation. Yeah, you said that, Pak Wahyudin, you said that you were struggling in trying to kind of frame what's your contribution from your thesis because there's a lot of study already on Islam and pesantren. But I think when you were explaining that actually the study of pesantren and Islam is mostly concentrated in Java, so that's already one of your contribution. Yeah, because that's already one of your contribution because you're doing it in other place. So that's one. Sorry, I missed the beginning of your presentation, and I was wondering did you interview people and who were they, and actually I'm sure you have used this in a lot of part of your thesis, but I think that's your source of also your source of contribution, because the statement from your respondent, if you can frame that together in each of the chapter, then that's also
One of my major concern also related to the fact that I'm a theologian by training because my undergrad, my second master's program, we're doing in religious studies, or more specifically in Islamic theology and philosophy. And one of the issues that my supervisor always raised when reading my chapter is that this is still theological explanation, because you didn't mention how do you know what you know. While in anthropological research, we really need to be clear. How could you know this event unfolding? For example, we say, I came to this Peringatan Maulid early in the morning, I saw people running and going and then building this and that. And my next explanation was based on my observations on this event. But I didn't say that because I've already known everything before coming to the field. So I explained that from my memory. And this is not true. For example, saying about the passages of the Quran that are recited by a preacher, I sometimes mention about the sources. This is from text 1 or from chapter 6 of this Quran. Why it doesn't necessary? I mean, we don't have to say that because we just say what the people say, and you then So to frame this into a more objective explanation is difficult. But on the other hand, I can take benefit from the fact that I know the textual basis for what people are arguing in the field, so I can give frame to that better than those who just get into the field like girls without knowing anything about the history of Islam, let alone the textual heritage of Islam.
Yeah, I think when you, there's a lot of my students also struggle when they try in the conclusion, try to state what are their contribution from their thesis. But you can look at it from various aspects. First, in the theoretical aspect, what is your contribution? And then second, in the methodology aspect, what is your contribution? Maybe, I don't know, but maybe you develop some kind of methodology that is not popular yet, and that it can be new that you use for collecting your data. So that's already two field, two field of contribution. What is your thesis contributing to knowledge, and then the methodology that you use, and then as well as the place that is very different from other. And why is it? So what's make it so different between pesantren in Java and in your study area?
So I would like to give a comments with Pak Wahyu experience how hard when we are like, we know everything, not everything, we know something before we come to the field. Especially like, I started talking about Islam and what in practice mostly, and then how people with the Islamic values see buildings. Sometimes I also kind of like put separation between me who's saying that or people. It's very difficult until the end you sit and read again. Oh, it seems like me who talking this, and then we sometimes add, okay, this derived from my observation on the day, what happening there, and then this how people talk about this issue. So very challenging.
Yes, please, yeah.
Any other?
I have a question to Devi. It's an interesting discussion on the concept of heritage, although I myself, I'm not from architectural background, but I found it interesting because the discussion you raise is linked to like anthropological and sociological discussion, especially when you display people's perception on the meaning of heritage. In this kind of discussion, what do you think you're finding? What do you think this finding can contribute to the development of heritage in Indonesia? I mean, is it only the discourse of heritage in architectural knowledge, or do you think you can give, or maybe your finding can contribute to the betterment of heritage in Indonesia? And my second question is that because you're focused on the heritage after tsunami, do you think it is the case that you raise is distinctive, more distinctive than other heritage in Java? Because we found that many heritage in our province, there are of course some improvements, innovations, and we don't know which part is original and which part are not. So, so what do you think your case that make it more distinctive than others? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was meant like to change something in Indonesia, but as you know, it's very hard. Therefore, at the end of my thesis, my conclusion, I suggest like two things. Firstly, to Indonesia, to Indonesian government, why we should like keep following European thinking of heritage. Like we copy paste what UNESCO has, and then we make our regulation. In fact, if you look closer, like we struggling with the term cultural landscape, and then we translate it in our language as Saujana. It's very complicated. Saujana is mean like sejauh mata memandang, as far as you can see. But cultural landscape, other things, that's so my suggestion, therefore, we need to know what is our tradition. Our tradition saying thing is impermanent. So when conserving things, we not always necessarily like to maintain its forms as original. Like this link to your second question. Like if you see maybe in Java as well, there is a research on Java after disaster as well undertaken by my colleague Guada at National University of Singapore for his PhD. He also observed that the chain of the structure, and even we can't see which one is original in terms of structure. But for people, there's the heritage because what activities there has been taken place for ages, like in the case Baitur Rahman Mosque, since 17th centuries, or people like come there for praying, for other religious ceremony. But because of the form changing, the container for containing that activity is changing, from UNESCO perspective, there's no heritage. So Indonesian government should promote that to, Chinese government actually does that. That's another chapter that how Ari feel that actually Chinese government also don't care a lot about authenticity of form. Even they're enough to promote, Indonesia engage in historic city program. Indonesia aims to be, from the 12, I think 10 cities that's, that's prepared for World City Heritage. But Aceh, it's very unique. That's empty land called Kampung Pandey, nothing there. If you go, only houses and whatever. But for Aceh's government, there is a set of heritage that where the Aceh's kingdom, Kerajaan Aceh, Sultan Aceh starts the kingdom, the life there. But because of disaster, mostly what argument I found in historical knowledge, and I discussed this with Antonio Reid as well, Professor Reid, that there's the case maybe disaster that pushed the city inland. So what distinctive between the one without disaster and the one with disaster? In the disaster context, heritage place like mosque is used as well as source of resilience, for example. I found in my interview, people say, I won't run to the escape building. No, there is escape building. If you still remember in 2011, there was also a big earthquake, and then when I did my fieldwork, some earthquake as well, 2012, people didn't run to escape building that designed for Sikhs refuge, but they ran to the mosque. In fact, the mosque was not designed, for that purposes, but for them to be in the mosque that have been approved, evidence said. Therefore, they didn't. Even in Tsunami Museum, when I did my interview with the manager, suddenly there is shaking. The Tsunami Museum itself was designed for evacuation, but none of people run to the top. They run down and run to the Baitur Rahman Mosque near the museum. It's very, that's the thing that make heritage in disaster area, especially in Aceh, distinctive for other places.
I'm also interested in the context of the thing that you raise in this context of heritage and doing research on heritage. My question is, what is the aspect of life and culture that makes you want to redefining heritage differ from what Western people have already defined?
Yeah, of course, because the way we see it different from them. Like I have mentioned before, most of what developed in Europe now or across the globe derive from romanticism of the past, of the form. We love the form than the function. If we look at architecture, almost too theoretical. Actually, if you learning architecture, you will come to understand that actually the building only have two main things: the form that you can see and the function. Like for example, this room function as meeting room or classroom. So activities we conduct here, it's part of the function. in Europe that developed in 18th century, what they value only the form. They value form then rather than the function. Therefore, now even though especially in architecture heritage debate, if you ever heard of adaptive reuse, when the building lost its original use or function, they change to, for example, from hospital to hotel or to something else, that's called adaptive reuse. From the perspective of European conservation ethos, that's really good because you retain the function. But they don't see the Baitur Rahman Mosque as heritage because the form has been changed, but the function still retained, you know. Therefore, that's what bring me to discuss this issue were two main reasons. Firstly, obviously my experience of losing a lot of things after tsunami. I lost my families, people who close to me, and then environment that I usually tie memory, you know, the things, sorry, but theoretical, because most of my research contribute to theoretical debate. So, for example, you see thing. This thing can remind you a lot. Even different thing can remind you the same memories. For example, if you go to the city, something you feel like there's the deja vu. Are you familiar with that? So I lost a lot of things that trigger my memory, and then I feel what happened to others. I asked question when first time I came, before I came to AMU, what happened to the other? Do they lose their connection with the past? Do they lose their memory when they lost their things? So sort of the question, and then why when we preserve heritage, especially architecture heritage, we should preserve the things. Is it a guarantee that the memory will remain the same? Will remain there? So sort of the questions, intellectual questions in my head until I came here, sat with my supervisor, and then try to framework why this happened, and then the finding, and then from my fieldwork, and then also I did a lot of literature review and read a lot of research in other part of the world that losing things necessarily lose memory, because memory is not in things, memory in our mind. Even like Redstone and Roxanne, they also goes beyond like what we are thinking. The memory even not in our mind. The memory is transferred, transformed, even betrayed, even so actually even the one who remember, who the witness of the event, can also remember in different way. Therefore, if you ask someone about the memories, if you observe, it can change as well. So from that departure, and then I think I need to define architecture heritage beyond what European culture or UNESCO has defined. That architecture heritage is beautiful building, monumental building that have historical value. But architecture heritage is just scaffolding that you use for temporarily rich your memory. But if that removed, that's okay. The memory is still there.
But if you, no, I just wondering, if you think like that, is it also mean that we don't need to preserve the heritage, because as long as there is connection, we don't need to preserve? If you say like that.
From my point of view, it's a very good question. There's a lot of this is actually also a lot of question between me and my supervisor. My supervisor actually, from UNESCO perspective, he is like separatist. She is separatist, you know. Therefore, we got a special conference for this point of view that called critical heritage studies. Luckily, when I run NAU 2011, the first critical heritage studies was in Gothenburg, Sweden, and my supervisor is, you know, the head of rebellion of this movement, you know, to get a new awareness of seeing heritage not only from what he determined as authorized heritage discourse. From authorized heritage discourse, from experts, from European point of view, you need to preserve. If not preserve, you you lost your heritage.
Mm.
But in fact, we in Asia, if you come to like Japan or China, there's long tradition to destroy the palace when the change of dynasty.
Mm.
Because like, you know, we need new one. Why not to preserve the other one? So very different tradition.
Mm.
So if you say we don't need to preserve, I will say what to preserve? The font? I don't think so we need to be so, you know, big fans of the font.
Mm.
Because if you as I look at the printing or in architecture, most of architects only are very arrogant of their, you know, their ability to present the font. Yeah.
Sorry. So in your thesis, you have somewhere that you have written or recommend to the Indonesian government that actually heritage is very important and there should be, maybe there is a law on it, that heritage should, in my opinion, I mean, I agree strongly with you that, you know, our memory can still be very vivid even though the object is not there.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I think relating to heritage, the object should always be preserved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very sad actually when I go around Jakarta, a lot of our
European.
heritage houses are destroyed and built into, you know, apa namanya yang sekarang?
Modernism. Yeah, but
Restaurant.
that's another different thing. But it was.
Yeah.
That's also my critique. But I think I mentioned it. I forgot in what chapter. I said like, but we shouldn't be trapped between how like the urge for modernity and how,
Yeah,
between
that's
in my thesis I termed a new term that called organic heritage discourse that emerge from people, from the values that community has, and the modernity. We shouldn't mix them the two because they're completely different.
Yeah,
If you see like the Baitur Rahman Mosque, what they do not for modernity, they change for containing more worshippers.
Yeah.
So like they
More
call it
big.
domes.
yeah.
And then in second case study that I saw, the Pelanggahan Mosque, it changed not because they want something modern, something fancy. They do it to provide a place for praying, for like, I can say curing their trauma. So if we delay this, for example, in this case of Pelanggahan Mosque, a lot of debate during the construction. We can't rebuild this mosque without proper, you know, agreement from blah 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 many organizations. But people need the mosque immediately. If we want to preserve as it is made of timber, it takes time. They need the
Yeah.
mosque, and then the PRR at the time took a decision to rebuild the mosque in this exactly the same style. I think you can see exactly T-toilet roof, but from different material. To me, that's called preservation,
Mm.
not in
Yeah.
terms of like we can't rebuild this because no timber.
Yeah.
People and then pray in the wreck building with the water dripping everywhere. It's not preservation, but preservation when you like give community values, community needs in the first place. But don't mix up with the other group that I call Earth for Modernism, like a lot of like. Actually, not in this research I found that. I did another research before I came here. I interviewed the chain of shophouses in Europe, toko-toko China in Aceh, Chinatown. Why no? There is no very modern building, no longer Chinatown architecture there. Most of them say we really want something modern and fancy. They say because being modern, being wealthy, showing your social status. If you live in old buildings, you are not. That's something different from my findings in these 2 months. So yeah, I agree with you, but I also realized that architecture has material consequence. I can't say like architecture no material. That's really anthropological point of view. My methodology. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention my methodology. Why a lot of anthropological view as well aqua architecture anthropology.
Mm.
Not a lot of research used in architecture use this methodology, especially looking at heritage. So I don't claim that I'm the first one, but not a lot of architect or nor anthropology use this methodology.
You should.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. I sometimes Indonesian we always want semakin berisi semakin
Menunduk.
semakin menunduk ya. But in the academia you cannot do that. You have to pinpoint what is your contribution because then somebody else will claim it. When they have it, but you haven't pinpointed. It's very important if you think that you have contributed something that is so different that no other have developed. You should say that in the thesis because you have the evidence. This is very important. Kalau aku nemuin kayak gitu, itu mahasiswa kita, itu kayak gitu dia punya ide bagus, dia nggak mau itu klaim bahwa, padahal itu penting.
Too humble.
Yeah.
Too humble.
Actually,
information.
actually, information. The same research has been done as well, looking at the iconic icon of the heritage, but using other methodology. This user is a Dutch architect as well. But in Aceh, looking at the same things like me, but he came up to a different conclusion. That he said Aceh has little awareness of tsunami, disaster symbols. Actually, my research showed the other way around. Disaster symbols is everywhere, even in every corner of the city. Even the gerobak bakso also has a disaster symbol.
There's one sheet.
Yeah, so different methodology in looking something can come to different result, different in social science.
Yeah. But one thing comes to mind when we talk about the importance of function instead of the form of the buildings being conserved as heritage building, is that the case in Saudi Arabia where most historical sites were destroyed by the current regime because they give emphasis on the functions of this site for the Muslim coming to Makkah every year. So they expanded the Haram Mosque
Yeah.
in order to accommodate more pilgrims to come, but at the same time destroy the important sites, like for example the former house of the Prophet's wife, and also the Prophet's birthplace, and so on. So are you, can you explain this from that perspective, saying that the Saudi Arabia kings are actually into this kind of perspective? I mean, they are actually implementing what US is doing.
Yeah, you come to very hard question. This as a planner, yeah, we also dealing with I forgot the term, but I learned this several years ago in Netherlands. Like when there is several issues around, you need to make a decision. If you don't make decision, there is no decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I tend
but
to
from
see
this
this
perspective,
before I forget,
Yeah.
but I tend to see this as part of their theological inclination, saying that we should not worship the place. We should worship just something that happened in this place. So I mean, Saudi Arabia regime, the Wahhabis ideology is very notorious of
we don't worship the place.
yes, of destroying all kind of tombs and place of worship that have a material object to be worshipped,
Yeah.
like even the wali. So don't go to kuburan, don't go to, and in order that people do not worship that, we should destroy them all. And that's part of the way they are doing now in terms of the sacred places in and around Makkah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then back to the people values in the place. As you mentioned, I was going to mention that as well. Like the Wahhabi has different point of view with us in Southeast Asia. Therefore, please correct me if I'm wrong. Islam in Southeast Asia completely different in Islam in there. Therefore, in my thesis, I also argue the way Islamic society value or venerating the place in Southeast Asia is not comparable to those in Middle East. So the way we relate to the place, even the way we say keramat is completely different from the understanding of keramat itself for venerating the place. and then we should also be aware, and then we should also ask ourselves as well, do maybe we like too much influence from European thinking? Because honestly, before I came here to ANU and do my research with Laura Dean Smith, I always preserve things. Even the ticket that I went somewhere with my friends is so special, I preserve. And then whatever, small thing for myself. And then I feel like, why I like collecting a lot of things? Okay, and I realized that my framework has been a lot of, my way of thinking has been framed by the way I see things, and that's come from our education. Yeah, education.
Yeah.
Especially like me, architect, and they're working a lot with conservation. Preserving things is important. You lost your memory if the building changed, for
Yeah.
example. So yeah.
But what about the commercial aspect of destroying these things? I mean, for me, I saw Saudi Arabian regime. It's not thinking about the importance of this place in terms of worshiping. I mean, worship.
Business for
purpose.
hotels.
Yeah, for hotels. So I don't think
Yeah.
I'm into that kind of perspective. And I respect European culture in terms of preserving old buildings and expanding the city instead of destroying the old city to preserve the memory. Because once you lose the memory of the past, you might repeat the past.
Yeah,
That-
Yeah.
but if you go to Western cities, you can't find the center of place anymore. The power of place, you know what I mean? The place just cool place, just well preserved, but no activities there. You know what I mean? So if you go to a lot of Asian culture, if you go to India, for example, that you see a very dirty street, or you go to Cambodia, but that's very vibrant. People still live in the way. Therefore, a lot of there's two different school of thoughts in my,
Yeah,
in my
yeah,
research.
yeah.
Yeah. So like most of my panels who sit in, except I'm Honorit, honestly, see like the vibrant, the dynamic of activities in most of European cities or heritage buildings have gone. Not in Asia. Therefore, when they come to Asia, they feel the vibrant. They swimming in Ganga, even like you know what I mean. And then they like Bali, something like that, because the building still function as it is. While here, the building is preserved, but see the church here, a lot of well-preserved church in Canada, but you can't see the vibrant there. Even they get jealous with our mosque, with like so. Yeah, different on our perspective in seeing that, but from my my school of thought, the school of thought that I adopted in my thesis, the vibrant and the way communities can engage, can touch, can be in the buildings that more important than like Stonehenge. Now has been fenced, you can't touch, you only can see. That's not good preservation, but the good preservation when you can engage, touch, use. That's from the school of thought that I adopted in my thesis. Yeah, I honestly enjoy seeing the beautiful buildings as well, but I feel that just cool monuments that preserve for
sorry,
site
last
vision.
question.
Yeah.
1 minute.
How do you then preserve the memory of the events that happen in that particular site? If there's no any symbols that
Yeah.
remind us about what happened,
Yeah.
what had happened.
Especially
Yeah.
for the next generation
Yeah.
who don't have any connection with
You
that.
will be very surprised. In Simalu, there is no monument of tsunami, but people know to run to the mountain.
So you rely on oral tradition.
Oral tradition, and then what is the evidence of the great king of Aceh? Tell me, show me what is the evidence of Iskandar Muda. He is a great
There is a
No.
tomb.
tombs, no tomb of Iskandar Muda. Still debatable. Where is Iskandar Muda
Name
tomb?
Iskandar.
No, but never Iskandar. Collective memories can't lie.
Ah.
It preserves to what words, what people around his.
I remember
watch.
visited the site, even the motel where Martin Luther King was assassinated in Mississippi. it happened just kind of 20 years back, like 1969, if I don't mistake. And everything in this room, in this hotel, were preserved, like the ashtray, the linens, and everything. And I asked the keeper of this room, why should you keep all these things? And he said, this is to remind us about the bad things happen in American life, in American democracy. And this place is visited by hundreds of students, young and old, and see what is the bad things, the negative side of this country, racism, apartheid, and so on. And there is a saying somewhere on the world, the nations that destroy the historical heritage and forget the history will be destined to repeat it.
Mm.
So in order for us not to repeat this kind of apartheid policy, we should always maintain everything that is left.
Yeah, that's very suitable for the culture, I
Yeah.
Because the case you bring forward is come from Western culture. That's sweet in their culture, but it is not necessarily sweet in our culture because we have different way of doing the things. Even like in Buddhism, if you read a lot of you Google like Buddhism heritage, you will find that they have the same like us. They change a lot of things in the temple, and then even their Tuhan, their God, changing every time. And then if they want to preserve the God, they put cement to preserve the God. That's really different way of seeing heritage. That's echoed by a lot of experts recently. That please look at our way of preserving heritage as well, not only European or Western ways of preserving heritage. So
Yeah, I think we arrived at the end of this
Yes.
session.